Yeah, so hi everyone and welcome to our series where we interview computer science faculty about their job search and interview experience to basically help future faculty candidates with their job search. And today we are here with Ayushi Rastogi, who has joined the University of Groningen as an assistant professor in April 21. Her research lies at the intersection of software engineering and artificial intelligence with a focus on developer and team productivity as well as diversity and inclusion. So with that, it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Manuel. I genuinely appreciate the initiative that you're spearheading. I wish it was available when I was interviewing, but gladly so, I think someone will benefit. So yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, could we perhaps start by you telling us a bit about your career path and also yourself?
Sure. My name is Ayushi Rastogi. I originally come from India, and I also did my PhD from India from a research institute named IIIT Delhi. Thereafter, I did two postdocs, the first one in University of California, Irvine, and followed by Delft University of Technology in Netherlands. And very recently, I joined as an assistant professor at the University of Groningen. In terms of research interest, I broadly work in the area of software engineering and mostly focusing on human and social factors. And as you also briefly touched upon in my introduction, it is mostly about enabling developers how to deliver their best, both on the work front, but also on the life front. And that's how I see where my research can add value to SE and science in general.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you started now in April with your new position. So how has the first half a year been and what kind of challenges did you have to tackle and what did you learn?
Interesting question. I wouldn't say I experienced much of challenges, partly also because I had a long history of postdoc, leading me to this assistant professor position. So, I mean, some of the things like, interacting with students, leading them, writing proposals. So these were not like a strange word for me, and I felt, much more prepared in order to join. But one thing, and I'm still, kind of working towards it, it's reporting to others, reporting to your supervisor about what you do. And I always feel, maybe somebody's just there to tell me, things are going well. It's okay. This is how you should be doing. But I think eventually I'll get used to it. And so far things are looking good.
So if you already have found a PhD student that is working with you or will work with you?
Yes, apparently. And my PhD student and I joined on the same date.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I think once I was like, by the time this position came, I was already uh, finishing my postdoc, and I was, my friends and colleagues did know that I might be looking for a PhD students, and I came across this wonderful student who was like, "Hey, I'm interested in doing a PhD," and we started this conversations, much ahead, I think few months before joining. So we said, okay, let's just start doing something together, just to gauge, if this is something he's interested and I'm interested. And yeah, the day I joined was also the day he registered as my PhD student.
And going in a different direction. So you mentioned that you did your postdoc at Delft or one of your postdocs. So you're not, I guess, new to the academic landscape or in general the landscape in the Netherlands. So how would you compare your experience at Delft with the, let's say, with the climate and atmosphere at Groningen?
I think one thing which starkly I find different is about what kind of a group that you're working with. And when I say so, I mean, so in Delft, it was a very focused research group. Everyone is focusing on testing or some aspect of testing. And although I was on human and social aspect, but I could clearly see where they see that a person with such a background can also fit into the picture. Uh, on a contrary, Groningen, I think, has a much broader focus. So you will find someone working in distributed systems in the same group, someone on architecture, technical depth, And then it's me now who is adding this human and social aspect. So I see that it's much more diverse. And while everyone is like within the area of software engineering, I could clearly see that, it's not the same. It's that you are an independent unit and you have a group ahead of you to run. So that is one of the major things that I am experiencing different. In addition to the fact that Delft was a technical university, but the way Groningen is seen, it also offers courses in natural sciences like physics, and it has economics and philosophy, and all those areas which I think technical universities generally do not cover. So I think for a person like me who is doing work in human and social aspects, it's a much natural environment to be in, because the things I talk about is not just about software engineering, but it does touches on other areas like economics, or I could pretty much borrow some insights from those fields. So that's, I think, one of the difference which I'm observing for myself.
I see. So I guess you will also have more collaboration opportunities, for example.
Indeed. I'm exploring what could be more natural and organic ways to integrate with the other divisions, because I do see people talking about diversity inclusion, everywhere, and it's not just software engineering or computer science. So definitely.
And I guess it's more difficult to compare, but you did 2 postdocs, one in Irvine and one at Delft. So how would you compare these two? And perhaps you can also give any suggestions for people wanting to do a postdoc?
Yes, definitely. I think it will be too naive to say, generalizing something for US versus Europe just by these 2 data points. But in my experience, I felt working in Netherlands was a little bit more chill in terms of the work life. I could clearly see, that people are not looking at their mails after the working hours. And I think it was encouraging and reinforcing for me, because when I was coming from US, I was like, okay, I think I had lost that sense of, work-life balance. But other than that, in my experience, it very much varies from group to group. So whether you are in United States or whether you're working in Europe, what matters the most is the immediate group you are working with. If you have a big team, you have a big support structure around you, which can, help you grow as a researcher, versus if you're a part of a small group, I think a lot of burden is just on you. And it can happen anywhere. I'm not saying that this happens in US or Europe, but that was like some of the things which really influenced my choices and decisions thereafter. And you also asked about the advice for potential postdocs.
Right, basically reflecting on your own experience, if you can give any, but I think you also already gave some, which was already very helpful.
I'll tell from my experience why I did postdoc in the first place. When I finished my PhD, I felt I know something about research, but I wasn't sure if I know enough to be, let's say, an person in academia. And I think as many of the PhDs also suffer this question, academia versus industry, I was also, somewhere in between, because when I work on things like team productivity and, effectiveness and things of this kind, it feels more natural to work in an industry environment. But then you also feel that you will get more freedom if you work in academia. So for me, postdoc was a time to introspect what I really want. If academia is something that I, can handle, I think, because just, hoping that research is not everything in academia. I think you understand this as well, that there are so many other ingredients which you should be, comfortable with, at least. For example, reviewing, as we were discussing before this.
Right.
And I just wanted to have a flavor what it would be, to be an assistant professor. And is this a life that I would want to live? So on one hand, I was, strengthening my skill sets, uh, which made me much more confident in joining as an assistant professor. And on the other hand, it was a time for me to reflect if this is it is academia that I want to pursue versus, industry. So I think these were the two prime reasons. And if I have to say something to, future postdocs, it will be, just go with the flow, go naturally, because you will learn a lot through the process. Maybe it helps you in deciding where you eventually want to be, but you will definitely learn.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, sounds like good advice. And I mean, also culture-wise, how easy or difficult has it been to get used to the life in the Netherlands, having lived at also other places before? So what were some of the obstacles or challenges that you met adapting to yeah, the culture?
I think culture is not something which we experience, in our everyday life, because typically when we work in university setting, we are surrounded by a lot of internationals, and it's a bubble that we live in, where everyone around us speaks in English, and they are multicultural, and they enjoy everything, and they want to party or do all those kinds of things. That said, I did not experience much cultural differences, in after I moved to Netherlands. Okay, one can say that the language is different, but I I think that was never a problem, because the minute they see you speaking in English or difficulty understanding Dutch, everyone just immediately switches to English. So
Mhm.
that is not a thing. Of course, you will have to get used to more of riding on bikes, but it's a good effect and nothing to complain about. But by and large, I think coming from India and also having worked in California, it was not a cultural shock to be in Netherlands. Maybe people are more direct, which is again a good thing in my view. But by and large, it was nice.
Okay, sounds good. And also to expand a bit on the Netherlands and the academic system with respect to application deadlines. So for Groningen, for example, was the position announced following the US kind of deadlines or a timeline, or they just announced all year around?
Oh, they announce all year round. So you just have to keep looking for one, or maybe even better, just contact someone if you know, to
Mhm.
check if there is a position coming in the future. So when I was applying, I was a little skeptical, because the COVID was just getting in, and I was like, okay, will there be any positions? So um, it, they did open up, not many, but a few. But they do open at all the times. So I mean, even when I was just about to, sign my contract, I see them, some positions were opening up. But so that's something a little different from the US system, that positions, I think, open up pretty much all the year round, and you don't have much much to say on those topics. But it's also good, because if you have missed a timeline, you still can apply and maybe get into the places you like to work at. So for me, the Groningen application opened in August, and then there were a few other applications which were like opening in October, in
Mhm.
November, and it was a cycle going on.
I see. As the last question about the academic system is the language of instruction. So based on what you explained earlier, I assume that most of the classes will be taught in English.
Yes. So here there are two kinds of universities. I think previously most of the education was happening in Dutch. But as a more and more international crowd keeps on coming, eventually all the higher levels of education are happening in English. So um, I think for us as instructors, it is no longer a problem to deliver in English, but I think it is also now easier for the international crowd to just, join these universities, because the primary means of communication is English. Even when we receive an email, it has always two texts, one in Dutch followed by in English, or, the order can be different.
Are there any other peculiarities about the Dutch academic system that we haven't touched upon yet?
That's a good one. I'm not sure if there is anything on the top of my head except for the fact that everything is very straightforward, and the amount of focus I saw on collaborations with industry, at least I haven't seen in any other place. I mean, even smaller companies, they are really keen on working with people in academia and, you know, via exchange programs, master students, or maybe even bachelor students. So this was something that I hadn't seen before. And I'm really happy to see, this kind of impact coming in with such deeper collaborations with companies. Um, so maybe it also happens in other European countries, but having worked in Netherlands, this was for me one of the biggest factor that influenced my decision to continue working here.
Okay, yeah, good to know. Yeah, perhaps let's start chatting about the job search. And perhaps as a first very general question, like how did the job search look for you? I mean, you already mentioned that the position at the University of Groningen came up in August. So I assume that because of this timeline, you couldn't really apply to multiple universities at the same time, or were there also other openings?
When it came to job search for me, I think I started applying when I was like fully sure that I'm ready to be an assistant professor. And I think part of the equation was that when I joined Delft University of Technology as a postdoc, my supervisor, Professor Ari van Duursen, he encouraged me to, apply for positions, internally, just for the sake of experience. So, I mean, I just applied without, thinking much. It was like, okay, I'll just get some experience of what it is, to apply in an academia. But what that experience really gave me was an exposure to what it means to apply. So by the time when I was confident that and ready, to apply for an assistant professor position, my applications had really, gone through, a lot of vetting in the meantime. And it really helped me grow. And so when I decided in, I think, June or July that, this is the time when I want to start looking for positions, um, I felt much more prepared in order to apply. And as far as, how the job search went for me, of course, the time when I decided, I was a little skeptical what the market is going to look like, because everyone around was talking that there is going to be a hiring freeze, and actually there was hiring freeze in US. But apparently it didn't bother me because I was looking for positions in the Netherlands or the areas nearby. So I said, okay, I'll make a list of places where I'm interested in, which might be some potential places that I'm interested to work in, and see if something opens up. So on one hand, I was just checking the portals, and on the other side, I just reached out to some of my colleagues in those universities to see if I can expect a position coming up in the future. So I think it went kind of both ways. And within a few months, I had an idea, what kind of what universities I might be looking at in the coming months. So somehow it felt very organic and natural that I applied for one position, and then there was a break of few months, and I again revised my application, made it somewhat better. Or I think you make a better version of yourself with each iteration. Um, but eventually the decision was like, I decided to join University of Groningen.
Yes, a follow-up question. So before the interview at Groningen, did you also have any other interviews before where you didn't feel completely ready yet, or was this like the first full visit?
So before I interviewed at Groningen, I interviewed at another place that was also another university I really wanted to work at. But I think interview process is a great time to learn. For me, I think it helped me reflect more on what I really wanted to achieve. So as I was talking about this another university where I applied, it was one of the places I extremely wanted to work at. But when, we discussed, what are my ambitions, what they expect from me, I eventually realized that I would want to work there, but maybe, a couple of years down the line. So perhaps not right now. So there was one application before, and I actually had actually received the offer, but even before receiving from any other university, I decided to turn down because I felt, I might not be able to do my best like at this position right now. Maybe a few years later, if I join here, it will be great for both of us. But yeah, so I think when I applied for Groningen, I had experience of one application, but yeah, it was nice.
Okay, makes sense, and sounds like a difficult decision.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. I mean, I asked to a bunch of folks around that, hey, have you ever declined an offer before receiving offer from anywhere else? And most of them said, if I were you, I would not do that. And it was also the time, that people will tend to think that, oh, you get a job, you take it. And I only had like my minor concerns about working for that university. But then I thought, okay, let me take a leap of faith. And I said no without having an alternate offer in the first place.
So but listen to your gut feeling. I guess that's also one takeaway. Yes. Perhaps.
I think that really helps because in the long run, this is how we have to proceed from here on. And the earlier we start listening to ourselves, I think the better it will be.
Yeah. Perhaps to chat a bit about the application materials. So for this position in the Netherlands and especially at Groningen, what kind of materials were necessary? Is it mostly the standard ones like CV, research statement and so on, or?
Yeah, it's I think pretty much normal. Like they expect a research statement, a teaching statement, and a job talk. And some places they were also expecting a talk about teaching. Yeah, and of course a cover letter because you need to just tie your story all together. So there wasn't anything specific as such, although for each university that I applied, they had some specific expectations. Like some of them wanted you to teach a specific topic. The others wanted you to focus on some aspect of like how you fit into the university, and also like some applications were more open, so you had to adapt your material in order to convey that how do you fit into that position, while other applications were more generic. Then again you have to justify, but in a different way, that why getting a SE person might be much valuable to them than anything else.
I see. So this also basically means that you tailored your materials to the position and institution you were applying, or?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a very conscious choice that I decided I'm going to apply for fewer places where I will join if given an offer. And I made sure that I give an application that is the best reflection of what I would be if I joined there. And it does require some amount of tailor fitting. And it's not like that we are trying to be fake or trying to be a different person, but I think it is an indication that what would we be, if we were there. So just to give you a sense of what it means, as I also mentioned to you about the difference between Delft and the Groningen group that I have worked and am working. So some groups are like very specific, and to add a dimension, you need to show what more do you bring to the group. While there are other groups where things are quite generic and you just bring a new dimension, like even just sometimes saying SE could be a new dimension in some places. So it does make sense, because if I'm portraying myself as a SE person in one place, I might have to focus on the basics of the courses, like courses on programming, courses on object-oriented programming, and so on and so forth. But when you are, let's say, joining a group where, let's say, they are focusing on human and social aspects, then you have to find a niche for yourself. And it's important to tell them what exactly you bring. I mean, generic applications, I think, somewhere fail to convey this intention of what it would be like if you are there in that group. So with every application, I felt I've got this position and this is what I'm going to do. And I just wrote it down. So I think this was my approach and I think thought system for applications.
Yeah, sounds like a very convincing application materials.
I hope so. They found it too. Yeah, I mean, the acceptance rate was fine. So I'm not complaining there.
Mhm. And when applying for institutions and positions, like based on what criteria did you decide whether you want to apply?
I think one thing which I did upfront was talking to a lot of people, from those universities or anyone that I knew around, to have a general sense of what it would mean to be working in a given group or university. Because what I understand is more than the university, what matters is the group that you're going to work with. And every group has a different culture or dynamics. So since I already mentioned that for me, it was about Netherlands and the nearby region. So I could just count the name of the universities on my hand. So it's not like I have to apply for 25 places or 50 places, as many people do. And on top of that, I saw that if I join here, um, what value can I bring in 5 years? So, I mean, do I have to convince everyone that software engineering is important? Or do I have to convince that a publication in XYZ conference and journal is important? And this is important because everyone knows better about what who they are, what kind of things do they want to do? Do they want to fight the system, or do they want to be integrated into an environment to grow as a team? Um, so for me, this was one of the criterias in shortlisting the universities. And I mean, since we often meet, I mean, we have some Netherlands local groups. Post-COVID era, we were meeting in person. So we also have a sense of what it might feel like, working in those places. So I did really think through which places I want to apply. And I think that quite reflected in the applications that I prepared for each of them.
And based on what you said before about doing these postdocs to become sure about whether to choose between research and academia, between research and industry,
And
or better, academia and industry. Did you apply to any industrial research positions as well, or completely not at all?
well, in the initial years, I did try for industry positions. I mean, also in India, like soon after my PhD. But I felt that the industry positions uh, that I was getting or were available at that point, uh, somewhere research was on the backside, and maybe I was not, willing to let the research go. And I think that's quite happening with the industrial positions these days, that you can do awesome work, but will it translate into a publication? Will there be a research element? I think it's a little uncertain. And somewhere deep inside, I was like, no, 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 this is not happening for me. So yeah, at different points, I did try for the industry positions just to see if there is still something that might be a good fit. Uh, and without it, I decided that I think, anyways, I was doing postdoc just to explore my interest. I think I'm hinging more towards academia than working in industry. Of course, collaborations with industry is a plus, and I think we all need in order to do some research with impact. But working in industry full time perhaps is not a thing for me.
Great. We chatted now a bit about preparation, so let's continue with interviewing. So our first question here is for the University of Groningen. Did you have any screening call, or did you get a direct invitation for a full visit?
So we submitted our documents, and actually I was first put on the waiting list, which when apparently got cleared, I was called for this interview. But since the COVID was like at the peak, all the interviews that I gave were online. Um, so it was a little disorienting because you want to get a sense of the place you want to work at. But my interview was, with different groups, and yeah, then we were given some time to think over, and then the decision came out. So I think since I applied in this specific time period, I had a very different experience from what generally people would experience had they applied in the post-COVID era,
Mhm.
sorry, pre-COVID era. um, but I did make sure that when possible, I visited the university in person. And this was not a part of the interview. The decision, like they had already told me it's a yes, but I still wanted to, meet the people and just have a sense of it myself before I make a final call.
I see. So you basically first did a full visit that was virtual, and
Yeah.
afterwards you still did a second visit after you already got the offer, right?
Yes. Yes.
I see. And for the first visit, what was the structure? You said you met with individual groups. Like, did you have one-on-one meetings and so on, or?
So, since it was a virtual meeting, we were given a schedule that from so and so time you will have a research talk, from so and so time a teaching, then we will discuss your general plan. And then there were a few meetings, like one with HR. I mean, everything was organized in one package. So you
Mhm.
can finish it in 3 to 4 hours, of course, with some breaks in between. And I think for all the places I applied, this was pretty much the structure, with the difference being that in some universities, they would spend up to 4 and 5 hours in the interview process, while with some it would be just 2 or 3 hours. So it very much varied. Like I think somehow they magically decided that they can make a decision in such a short span of time. Maybe also to reduce this Zoom fatigue and other things. Um, but that's how the interview process went online.
And with the teaching meeting that you mentioned, there you basically gave a demo of what you teaching a class would look like, or how did this work?
So different applications had different expectations. Some of them had an expectation that you teach anything in software engineering, and you give an introduction, like which audience is it for? So is it for a first year bachelor student? Is it for a master student? Just to have a sense of, what it is. And there were other places which had given specific topics, like you have to teach, let's say, continuous integration. And they also gave some reference material that this is what we are expecting, like. So yeah, I mean, at Groningen, I did not had a teaching interview, but for other places, I did prepare for, a teaching talk where I described, if I were to offer a course, how would I teach a given topic? But as I understand, less emphasis was like, or less time was spent on teaching in comparison to the research and your vision for research and running a group in general. So that's a general pattern which I saw across all the applications.
Did you also receive any surprising questions during the interviews?
Actually, not. No, I didn't. I mean, I am in Netherlands, and it was much natural for them to expect that I'll be applying to positions in Netherlands. So by and large, it was a very smooth, like just a general chit chat, like just as you and I are talking. I felt most of my interviews to be just like that, and there wasn't anything funny or weird that I would say happened during my interviews. It was quite expected. I mean, they were trying to understand me, I was trying to understand them, and we both made our best attempts at reaching a right decision.
To also follow up on this, so sometimes people say that it's not only the institution that interviews you, but you are also interviewing the institution or trying to get more information. So what's your take on that, and how did this reflect also in your meetings?
Absolutely. I mean, I fully agree to this idea. I mean, honestly, I'm a person who, if somebody tells me that you are just being interviewed, I'll be a bit more nervous. But if I also know that this is also my opportunity to understand the other person, it kind of opens me up to the idea that we both are just trying to reach an understanding of what is the best fit. And this mindset was very important. So generally, like when they ask you a question, do you have any questions for us? And I've heard, you know, like from my friends and colleagues that they say they don't have. And I think it's such a missed opportunity, because this is the only time you have, you can get to understand what is the vision of the group, what they are trying to achieve, what would it mean for you to be in that group, what can they offer to you, what can you offer to them. And even, you know, just getting a sense of, you know, what is their picture, what is their focus, I think that will very much help you in deciding which positions to choose. Because once you have a couple of offers, how do you make a decision? I mean, yes, you apply to a couple of places, they all looked nice, what next? So I think this is one thing, if I have to advise future applicants, that they should thoroughly focus on in understanding who they are going to work with. Because uh, another thing which I felt is that you cannot know everything about the group you will work at. I mean, you can do an enormous amount of homework and research, but there will always be something that you understand when you are inside. But there are a lot of things that you can understand before joining. And um, one should definitely spend some efforts into this and not just on preparing their research and teaching material.
Yeah, and do you think it's also applicable in, for example, when they ask you, do you have any questions, to not only ask questions about, for example, research, teaching, service, and so on, but also about, let's say, personal circumstances, or like how the life in the city is, and so on?
You just asked me two questions like life in the city. I think that's an easy go. I mean, they'll be really happy to tell you what it would be like if you move to that place. But personal questions, I think it's a bit tricky, and I also feel one has to go by their gut feeling.
Mhm.
In my case, one, no one asked any personal questions, maybe because everybody knew me already. Uh, well, not everyone. I mean, I think by and large it was known. Um, but you have to take a call what you want to tell, what you don't want to. And if you choose to not tell, you should be, you know, prepared that the decision and everything will be based on it. So one advice which I got was that be true to yourself. Um, don't paint a picture which is not real and which cannot sustain in not now, not in the future. So I try to be my best, not try to portray as someone else. And I think this is also applicable to the personal questions. So you have to make a call. Is this something worth discussing? Is there something so important to you that can influence your decision? And if it does influence your decision to join a university, do discuss. Because if their answer is no, by no means this place is for you. I mean, ranking aside, I mean, you will never flourish in such an environment. So if you are getting a no from a university because you have described your personal situation, it better be. I mean, this is how I take about the personal situation. But I'm sure like people have, you know, much deeper thoughts around what to do with these. And I think it has to go on a case by case basis.
Mhm. Makes sense. And in terms of preparation for these interviews, can you share any kind of advice, any kind of strategies that you used for preparation?
My strategy for preparation was, I think, that slowly steaming my application over the time. I mean, I've heard like people spend months just preparing on their documents, you know, sitting aside 1 month or 2 months or whatever. But for me, what worked the best was, you know, start preparing it. I mean, I'm not sure if everyone has the time to do postdoc for this long, which I think really helped me brew my application. Because when you prepare it this way, I think the idea becomes much more mature. I mean, I still realize that the first time I prepared the application, I learned a bit more about what I can do with my research, what I could do in next 5 years. The next time I revised it, I knew what I could do in the next 8 years or 10 years. So I think sit on it. It's not just about getting the job. If you do this process well, it can also maybe help you in identifying what proposals you will be writing or what projects will you be giving to your students. So take your time with the process and application. And if you can do it more organically, naturally, it will reflect in your interviews. And as far as the interviews are concerned, um, I did not like prepare a lot. Like some people practice for hours and give it to many people. My strategy was that I I just presented once, just to have a sense on, what aspects am I missing? Is this something that captures something which everyone will understand? Is this something that, so I divided my presentation into 2 or 3 parts. So the first 1/3 was like, this should be that everyone should understand, irrespective of what their background is. And then there was something a bit more deeper, and then a bit more deeper. So my idea was this, and I just talked to people about it, but not like practicing for hours and hours such that it feels like rehearsed. Um, because once you do that, it, it doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel like a conversation. Um, so, but on the other side, I have seen people who like really prepare for it, like who once, twice, thrice, and they feel more comfortable that way. But all I can say is that it doesn't have to be that way. If you can speak naturally, if you think that this could be if this is your style, just go for it, and that also works.
I see, yeah. Seems like a trade-off to balance about still being excited to present the job talk and having it practiced well enough to give a good version of it, right?
Yeah. I do always practice the first 2 or 3 slides. That I always do, because I feel that once 2 or 3 slides are gone, I think it's hard to lose your confidence.
Mhm.
That's but that could be just me. So I always tell everyone, just do what works for you. So for me, like once I've practiced the first 3 slides and it has gone well, no one has trashed me out, it's going to be well for the rest of my presentation. That's
Sounds
just
good.
me.
I wish I didn't have to prepare it that often. But anyway.
No, I think, Manuel, this is what I feel. Everyone knows what their strengths are, and everyone has to work on, their weakness. So for me, I really have a hard time remembering the names.
Mhm.
So for me, it was such a scary thing, because in an interview, you meet so many people, and this was also virtual. It's hard to remember who you are talking to. So everyone has their own, you know, strengths and areas for improvement. So I decided that I will focus my energy on those side instead of, speaking, because that's something I know I can do. So it's not like, it's not a rule book that you have to practice 5 times. I would say practice on what you think you lack the most. And
Yeah.
it should be like a balance. You should not spend months and months just for preparation.
Yeah. We chatted now a bit about interviewing. So I would say let's continue with the decision process. And there the first question is like, how did you proceed after receiving your, let's say your offer from the University of Groningen?
Yeah. So I already mentioned to you about this another university where I said no, even before I heard from Groningen. But
Mhm.
there was another university which also happened to offer me position at the same time as University of Groningen. So I think that was the most strenuous time for me. I mean, getting a job, I think it was like much easier than taking this decision. So I talked to lots and lots of people. I asked that, see, I have these two positions, and what should I do? So everybody discussed, this is what they think is a pro and con of working in XYZ university. I even actually talked to, people from the university, again, because I wanted something more to know, because it was too close. to make this call.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I felt that while the two universities were quite similar, one of them, which is of course Groningen, is perhaps a better for my career at this stage than the other one. And that that's how the decision was reached. And I even communicated the same to the other university, that I was interested, and I was actually was. But ultimately, I, inclined a bit more towards the University of Groningen. So I think that was the most difficult time. Everyone was saying, "Hey, you should relax. You have a job. You have two jobs." But it's a very, very important decision, and I wish that everyone, spend a good amount of time in making this call.
And so for Dutch universities, what does the offer package typically include? For example, is there some startup money also that is given?
Yes, indeed. So there is a starting package which includes one PhD position, which is yay, because if you have to start your research group, you need this money. And there is also, a bit more that you can ask for depending on what you foresee you may need. So as I was telling you that I was preparing my job application for quite some time, the way it helped me, I had some ideas, what all places I may need some money. So I clearly gave a clear division that I would need this much money for computation, this for that. And once I could clearly justify what my needs are, they didn't hesitate in offering me that amount. And I think this was a pleasant surprise.
Sounds
So
supportive.
yeah, it does really help you in starting off, and until you get your own proposals for funding. So yeah, I think one should really spend some thought. I mean, of course, after the process is through, of how much you can or you need, not just you can ask, but how much do you need in order to start your group in the first place.
Mhm. And before accepting the offer, did you also negotiate any parameters?
Well, I wouldn't say much of a negotiation otherwise, because as the Dutch system, there are quite predefined scales. But of course, there can be like, one or two levels up and down if you really want to discuss. I mean, they also consider your years of experience into postdoc. So, I mean, or your years of experience that you have in general. So they do consider that while offering you the package. So you can discuss that, but it's not like that you can really negotiate on the salary scale. It's very minimal that you can talk through what you think your experience is and where you should be starting.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. And perhaps two questions to wrap up. So the first question is, are there any kind of special memories, any kind of experiences that stuck with you from the whole interviewing process?
I know it's quite a weird dream, but I always wanted to dream. I always wanted to interview in my pajamas. And since all the interviews were work from home, I mean, all I needed to care was about what is visible on the screen. And in one of my interviews, I did interview in my pajamas, and nobody knows, nobody cares. But deep inside, I was like, I have achieved my dream.
In a pajama.
Yeah, in a pajama. And yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed my interviews. I think it was so much like a conversation, chit chat. And the places where I didn't enjoy my interview, I also didn't get the offer.
Mhm.
So I think you do get a sense of, what's going to happen simply based on your conversations with them. So, I mean, some of those interviews are like really memorable, and maybe I can apply more. No, not for a job, but it was like a worthwhile experience where so many people are sitting out just to understand your research. I think it's really hard to get this much attention nowadays. So yeah,
Right.
I think I really enjoyed my experience thoroughly.
It's often people don't talk about it. It's actually much more than only a job interview, right? You can make your research known. to network
exactly.
and all these other kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, for me, it was like a very nice time even to understand what things I could do next. I mean, some of these interactions give me thoughts and ideas. So I loved it. I really enjoyed my experience of interview.
Okay, that sounds great. And as a last question, so what suggestions can you give to future faculty candidates reflecting on your own experience?
One thing which I advise the future applicants that if they have time, do go for a postdoc and explore, your interest, because a career in academia is intense. It does require you to be able to focus on many things. Initially, soon after my PhD, I felt I just want to do research. Who wants to do teaching? But you have to understand that every career choice has, some requirements, and only if you are comfortable, go for it. And preferably go naturally, go organically, because that is a way um, you will end up in a career that is more suited to you than anybody else, and no one knows it better than you yourself. So these are just my 2 cents on job application and choice of career in general.
Okay, great. Then thanks for the great advice and for joining us today, Ayushi.
Thank you so much, Manuel, for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you.